Greetings, this is Griff Ruby, the Nostalgic Catholic, with another Isaac Asimov short story review. And not only the name, but the name of the story is featured on the cover. Feeling of Power, Isaac Asimov, the February 1958 edition of If Science Fiction. So, what can we learn about this? Well, there's a couple of things. You notice listed as a short story here. So, Feeling of Power by Isaac Asimov, page 4. I do note, however, on page 2, there's a small comment that I thought was kind of interesting. And it's in the editor's report on page 2. And it's down here in this little blurb here, and it says, following through on our practice of letting readers in on just what authors do, we corralled the master, who's the lead-off man in this issue. Asimov, page 4, first story. Okay. Seems as though all people, without exception, he claims, who meet Isaac Asimov for the first time are startled to find him clean-shaven, except, of course, for 5 o'clock shadow. For some reason, an immediate picture of a patriarchal type with a long white beard, or at any rate a dignified Van Dyke, rides unbidden when his name is mentioned. Isaac has been writing science fiction for 20 years, but insists he started as a teenager. He's still not that old. The whole thing is even more demoralizing when some great muscular hunk of humanity boasts that he is born in the same year that Asimov's first story appeared. Of course, the resounding title of Associate Professor of Biochemistry at Boston University, plus the fact that the man has several learned textbooks to his credit, may have a great deal to do with this modern fable of Old Man Asimov. So, once again, since this is February of 1958, although his first story makes its appearance in early March of, well, actually January, but the March issue of Amazing Stories 1939, but he sold his story in 1938, and he'd been writing stories since he started Cosmic Corkscrew under the encouragement of John Campbell in 1937. So, yes, as he's writing all of this, he has been writing stories for 20 years. Okay, so now we get to the part where we get the Feeling of Power. There's an interesting little blurb and one very nice piece of artwork illustrated by Virgil Finlay. Okay, so this is what we have. You can see the blurb there, and you can see the artwork here. So I'll read the blurb, then we'll look at this artwork a little bit. Graphitics was a startlingly new idea. So revolutionary, in fact, it rocked the top army brass. Imagine computing without a computer. So here's this picture, and all here is, they just call him technician. My name's actually Myron Alb. He appears in the story. He's kind of bald. And then you have these various military guys who are seeing his presentation, and almost, as if they're almost unable to believe what he's able to do. And you can see this one's here looking at this paper where, look what he did. Look what he did. He calculated that 17 times 23 is equal to 391. And you've got the same figures on the board. Amazing. Computers that get smaller and smaller until finally the day comes when we don't need them at all. So that would be like this, the final end of it all. So that's what it is. This is set in a time so far future that computers design and make the computers. People don't do it anymore. And in fact, people have forgotten how computers work. They don't have to know, the computers know, that make the further computers, and so on it goes. So just normal calculations, like even simple arithmetic, have kind of become like lost arts. until this one guy decides, the technician Alb, the little bald-headed guy you see at the chalkboard there. Chalkboards, see how it's black and the writing is white? They did chalkboard. They didn't have whiteboards yet, which would be the opposite color. So, at any rate, he's up there with this chalkboard showing an equation there, simple mathematics. This times this is that. Arithmetic, really. And and yet all these people haven't seen anything like that. They're so astonished. They're blown away. And so it becomes this whole big thing that they start developing. They're going to have this thing called Project Number. They're going to see what they can do with this. Somewhere along the way, technician Al shows, oh, by the way, there's not just multiplication. We can do division, too. And the numbers don't have to divide evenly. We can do decimal points, however far. So we go, how about this by that, that many digits? And he just does it, and there they are. And then he gets out his calculator, computer, whatever, and says, my goodness, he's right. Wow. So it was just kind of now this for me seems to have this weird flavor of a story that I probably heard a long time ago, or read, or somebody summarized it or described it. I don't know. It's a familiar story to me, where everyone was just so surprised that this guy knew how to do simple arithmetic with just paper and a pencil, because everybody's used to using computers to do all their number crunching, even the simplest multiplication for them. And even before I knew anything of Isaac Asimov, this was kind of one of those stories, sort of like that other one way back that appeared in some story in the various places called The Fun They Had, about kids and learning from little computerized teachers at home. And anyway, I've commented on that one already. This was another one of those ones, kind of encouraging people to learn your multiplication table kind of a thing. So that's kind of the idea of it. He does briefly talk about maybe even figure out how to do square roots, but that doesn't seem to be quite perfected. They're not totally sure on all of it. So anyway, Technician Ob is sharing this because he's hoping that maybe these government weenies will be smart and wise, and they'll take what he's giving them and find ways to do really wonderful, noble things with it. And then they start talking about what they want to do. Well, you see, it's defense. And there's a war going on with some planet called Deneb. Okay, I don't know if it's a number, but at any rate, some planet going around the star called Deneb. And they've been fighting with these computerized missiles. The computers are rather limited, both for the missiles themselves to try to get through an attack, and those that are launched from the other side, from the defense, to try to intercept those missiles and blow them up in space. So, you've got some pretty good advanced concepts here that really, at this time when this was written, were totally unthinkable, but it kind of stood to reason that in time, with enough computing power or something, there'd be a way to do these things. And so, you kind of see here the talk of the smart bomb. Well, now we just figured out a way to make the bomb a whole lot smarter and without having to put this computer on board. Since you have to remember, this is a time when a computer was still a very limited piece of equipment that filled the room and had all these giant spools of tape drives and just printers and card readers and all this different stuff. A computer was a monstrous piece of equipment, and if it wasn't monstrous, then it would be a rather simplistic computer, and maybe of the sort that doesn't do a whole lot more than a little bit beyond basic arithmetic. Actually, surprisingly, a lot of the orbital mechanics equations can be done with simple matrix multiplication. So, there's a little bit more than just this times that, but it's all stuff that's actually fairly doable. So, at any rate, they have looked at this idea. Let's put human beings in our missiles, and they will be there instead of the expensive, valuable, and not so great or versatile per unit of weight volume, I guess, computers that we've been using up till now. So it's like advancing from smart bombs with computers, which, of course, I remember during the Iraqi war, we would sometimes hear about our smart bombs that would go to this building, they'd fly in one window, and fly out the other window at the other end of the hallway, at the other end of the building, and crash into some garbage can on the outside of the building. You hear these stories like that. So maybe the smart bombs still weren't all that smart, but you get the idea. They were getting better, and no doubt they're really good now. But let's do something even cleverer. Let's put a human inside. That human can steer this thing and think of clever ways to steer around the defense screen and so on and so forth, and get through and blow something up. Now, this is 1958. World War II is, 15 years before. We're in the thick of World War II. And what was one of the things we met up with? What was one of the most formidable things we met up with during World War II? It was the kamikaze pilot and his aircraft. He is, together with his airplane, which is just one giant bomb, a smart bomb, if you will. And not a very smart use of a human life, but smart bomb in terms of being able to steer itself intelligently to its target and blow that target up. The pilot with it. You had to be very seriously dedicated to the Japanese cause to be willing to be a kamikaze pilot. You learn all of what it takes to be a pilot, and then you're going to use that knowledge once. So, and here's all these defense people going on and on like this. And the technician is seeing all this, and he's really disappointed. He's seeing that all this nice thing that he came up with isn't even going to be used for the benefit of humanity. It's just going to be used for the to try to advance the cause of the war. And he just decides, and he writes a note about all this and says, I don't want any part of this. It was just an amusement. I thought people were smart, but now I see, they're not going to do anything useful. So I don't want to be responsible for this. And basically he kills himself. And then it's kind of an interesting thing. They stood over the grave of the little technician while tribute was paid to the greatness of his discovery. And then a programmer by the name of Schumann bowed his head along with the rest of them, but remained unmoved. The technician had done his share and was no longer needed after all. He might have started graphics, but now that it had started, it would carry on by itself overwhelmingly, triumphantly, until manned missiles were possible, along with who knew what else. So he became expendable. I guess if human beings can be expendable in one context, they can be expendable in another. So that's exactly what happened. So let's see. I did catch one small typo, and that had to do with basically it was a war of computers against computers, and that it is a was of computers. Like, oops, they fixed it from the book. Which this particular story is yet another story, really good stories gathered up into tomorrow's. So that's this story, Feeling of Power, and I'll leave it as a small non-spoiler why it has the title Feeling of Power. So there's at least that. Unfortunately, the story has managed to become highly dated, owing to the idea of computers not being so smart when you consider how much smarts they can put in, just a few ounces of computer chip. So that time has passed. That applicability is over. And the idea of people really totally forgetting how mathematics can be done is, well, it was just an idea. Learn the multiplication table, and you'll know stuff that at least all these people in this story don't know, and you can be like technicians now and sought after. I don't know. He wanted to encourage education. You have to remember, it was getting to the point where we had to do that. So there it is. Thanks for listening.